My name is Emily Carter, and for as long as I can remember, loneliness had been my constant companion. It wasn't that I had no friends or no one to talk to, but after my parents passed away within 2 years of each other and my younger brother moved across the country, the silence in my little suburban house in Oregon felt heavier than I could bear. I would wake up in the morning, pour myself a cup of coffee, and sit at the window as the sun filtered through the trees, thinking of the life I once had, a life filled with laughter, dinners with family, and spontaneous road trips. Now it felt like a photograph left too long in the sun, faded, blurry, and fragile. The days blurred together, each one echoing with the same routine. I worked remotely as a freelance editor, which meant I rarely had to leave the house except for groceries or the occasional errand. My evenings were filled with books, old movies, and the quiet hum of loneliness that I tried to ignore. Sometimes, I would hear laughter from the houses around me, families gathering for dinner, couples talking on porches, children playing until dusk. I would smile, but deep down, the ache of not belonging anywhere gnawed at me. It was a Thursday evening in early fall, the kind where the air carried the scent of wet leaves and the wind made the branches creak. I had just finished editing a manuscript when I heard a knock at my door. It startled me because I wasn't expecting anyone. I rarely had visitors, and deliveries were usually left at the step without any need for knocking. When I opened the door, I saw a man standing there, his hair damp from the drizzle, his jacket zipped halfway up, and his expression both apologetic and hesitant. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with kind brown eyes that immediately softened the guardedness in mine. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, shifting awkwardly. "I'm new in the neighborhood, and I think I may have the wrong address. I was looking for 452 Maple Drive." I smiled faintly, though my voice cracked with disuse. "This is 442. You're a block down." He laughed, embarrassed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Of course. Figures I'd get lost on my first week here. I really appreciate you not slamming the door in my face." His words caught me off guard, and before I realized it, I said, "It's no problem. Do you want me to point you in the right direction?" He nodded, grateful, and as I gave him directions, he extended his hand. "I'm Daniel Hayes, by the way." I hesitated only briefly before shaking his hand. "Emily Carter." There was something about him, an ease in his manner, a warmth in his smile, that lingered long after he left. I closed the door, thinking it would be the last I saw of him, but fate had a different plan. 2 days later, another knock sounded at my door. When I opened it, Daniel stood there again, holding a plate covered with foil. "Before you think I'm stalking you, I promise this is just a thank you. I made too much pasta and thought you might want some." I blinked, taken aback. No one had ever done something so thoughtful for me in a long time. My instinct was to politely decline, to retreat into the solitude I had grown so used to. But something in his hopeful expression made me nod instead. "Thank you, that's really kind." He grinned. "I'll let you be, then. Just thought I'd drop it off." After he left, I sat at my table staring at the plate of pasta, a lump forming in my throat. I hadn't realized how much I missed simple gestures of kindness, the kind that reminded you that you weren't invisible. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel and I began to cross paths more often. Sometimes he would wave from his driveway, other times he would stop by with leftover food or ask if I needed help with something around the house. Slowly, the walls I had built around myself began to crack. One chilly evening in November, I invited him inside for the first time. We sat at my small kitchen table, sipping hot cocoa while the rain pattered against the windows. He told me about his job as a paramedic, how he had moved to Oregon after a difficult breakup, looking for a fresh start. I found myself telling him things I hadn't shared with anyone in years, about my parents, my brother, the silence of my days. "You know," he said softly, his eyes meeting mine, "being alone isn't the same as being lonely. But sometimes, the right person comes along and makes you realize you don't have to be either." His words stayed with me long after he left that night. The weeks rolled on, and our connection deepened. We went on long walks through the neighborhood, explored the local farmers market, and spent evenings watching movies together. Daniel had a way of filling the silence without overwhelming it. He laughed easily, listened intently, and carried a kindness that felt rare in the world. One snowy December night, he knocked on my door again, this time holding a small potted plant with twinkling fairy lights wrapped around it. "Merry early Christmas," he said with a grin. "I figured your living room needed a little cheer." I laughed, tears prickling my eyes as I set the plant on the coffee table. It wasn't the grandest gift, but it meant more to me than he could possibly know. For the first time in years, my home felt alive. What I didn't expect was how much his presence would change me. I started reaching out to old friends, taking walks by myself, and even volunteering at the local library. Daniel reminded me that life wasn't meant to be lived behind closed doors. But life has a way of testing the fragile happiness we find. One evening in February, Daniel showed up at my door looking troubled. He had just returned from a difficult shift, and I could see the weight of his job pressing down on him. "Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice moving here," he admitted, his voice heavy. "What if I never really find what I'm looking for?" I reached out, placing my hand over his. "Maybe what you're looking for isn't a place. Maybe it's a person. Maybe it's about finding home in someone, not somewhere." For a moment, he looked at me with an intensity that made my heart race. And in that silence, I knew something had shifted between us. Our story was never dramatic or filled with fireworks. It was quiet, built on small moments and unexpected gestures. A knock on the door that turned into late-night conversations, laughter echoing in my once empty living room, and the slow realization that loneliness had loosened its grip on me. Months later, as spring bloomed and the world seemed brighter, I thought back to the first time I heard that knock. I realized that sometimes the most unexpected connections come when you least expect them, when life feels stagnant and you think nothing will ever change. One simple moment, one chance encounter, can alter the course of everything. I had been alone until Daniel knocked on my door. But because of him, I learned that even the heaviest silence can be broken, and that sometimes, all it takes is a stranger's kindness to remind you that your story isn't over.